Hey guys, how are you? Welcome to another episode of One Guy and One Beer. I am your host, Nick Ostick. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're recording this on a Sunday afternoon, a rainy, dreary Sunday here in Galesburg. Um, Apologies off the bat for not posting last week. I had the show all recorded, ready to go, and then in the editing process, I discovered that the audio and the video weren't syncing up properly, and my mouth was doing things that was not in line um, with the sound that was coming through, and I couldn't figure out how to make it work. And so rather than put something out there that was sort of disorienting and just kind of crappy, I decided to just trash that show and chalk it up to our first lost episode. So awesome, right? But I was super bummed because the beer that I did on that show, I really, really enjoy. I think it's a great beer, so I was kind of a little blue about that. But then I discovered a second bottle in the cellar, and so we're just going to redo the show, and all will be right with the world. The beer that we're going to be doing today is Victory at Sea from Ballast Point Brewing Company out of San Diego, California. Ballast Point, kind of a cool story, or just sort of a cool little tidbit about how they came about. Started by, I believe it's just one guy, in the back of a homebrew store in San Diego, and he just churned out small batches of beer in the back of this homebrew store. And then, as so many large-scale production breweries go these days, he gained a following, became more and more popular, and then was able to open up a proper brew pub. And after that, continued to sort of grow in notoriety, and now they've got a full-scale production brewery. And I believe they have a distillery too. They do spirits. But they've been around for maybe 10 years or so, and definitely their sort of claim to fame is their IPAs. They make a few of them, particularly Sculpin. That's sort of their big stalwart beer. Big West Coast IPA, and it's held in pretty high regard. It's one of those IPAs that has come to typify that West Coast style, and is actually sort of one of the standard bearers of that particular style. So, West Coast IPAs, super hoppy, really, really piney, really, really resinous, definitely bitter. So that's sort of where Ballast Point's claim to fame lies. But this beer in question is not one of their big IPAs. This is their Imperial Porter brewed with coffee and vanilla. Ballast Point recently came to my neck of the woods. And as soon as this beer sort of arrived on the scene, it obviously piqued my interest because I love anything that's infused with coffee and vanilla. And ever since trying it for the first time, I've really, really been digging it and been trying to get as much of it into me as possible. Plus, I just love the label art on it. If you can, I don't know if you can see it. It's like a skeleton there who looks like he's experiencing a considerable amount of pain and anguish, but still pretty neat. Yeah. So, like I said, it's an Imperial Porter. Just some quick style notes on Porter. It's a really sort of... Oh, sorry. Almost had an accident outside there. Outside the house. That was bad. It's a style that it can be kind of murky or difficult to pin down. It originated in the 1700s in London, and it's sort of named for the dock workers who came to really embrace the beer, sort of their traditional, like, after-work beer. So, the transporters on the dock, hence the name Porter. There are sort of three different variations in the porter style. You've got your brown porter, you have a robust porter, and you have a Baltic porter. What sort of differentiates these incarnations can vary between the level of roastiness, of maltiness, sort of the richness or mouthfeel of the beer. Your brown porter is going to be sort of similar to your brown ale, whereas your robust porter is going to be a little bit bigger in mouthfeel, going to be a little more substantive, maybe a little more, have more bitterness to it as well. Whereas then your Baltic porter, that's going to be your big boy. That's going to be your highest probably in terms of ABV or alcohol content. but also probably your most complex in terms of flavor. So you're going to have a lot of sort of rich flavors, some chocolate, a lot of malt, maybe even some coffee notes, even if the porter's not brewed with coffee. But more or less, porters they can be similar to stouts, but it's going to be a really dark beer. It's going to be very malt forward. You're not going to have a lot of hops or a lot of bitterness necessarily. Um, Definitely a decent level of sweetness, and like I said, those chocolatey notes. Yeah, it can be kind of a rich beer for sure. Um, so yeah, Victory at Sea. Let's crack it open and give it a taste, shall we? There you go. Let's see, give it a nice little pour here. That's probably good. All right. So, like I said, checking this beer out, as you guys can see, this is pretty typical for the style. I mean, it is almost jet black. You hold it up to the light, you might get some brown highlights, almost maybe like really really dark ruby red. But again, this thing is jet black. Um, as you see, good head retention on it. A couple of fingers there. Nice sort of tan espresso head. Um, Not a terribly viscous beer. It's not like sludge, right? It's not like motor oil. Like some imperial porters or some stouts can be. But it leaves a nice little bit of lacing on the glass for sure when you tip it. But really, really pretty beer. I can already smell it from here. I'm going to withhold those those aroma notes till I actually smell it. Um, but yeah, very, very nice beer. Like I said, it leaves some lacing. Glass is a little dirty there. That's not great. This clocks in at 10% ABV, by the way. So they're calling it an imperial porter. Imperial porter, Baltic porter. It's tomato. It's the same thing. The word imperial is just more common in the American craft brewing landscape than something like Baltic porter. It's the same thing. Imperial really just means that one element of the beer is going to be amplified, or sort of really that's going to be the focus of the beer. It can be, if it's an imperial like IPA, it can be the hop presence. If it's an imperial porter, it can be whatever they choose to infuse in it. Honestly, though, more times than not, when you see the word imperial before a beer, if it's an imperial IPA, imperial porter, what have you, it usually means the alcohol content is going to be upped. It's going to be higher than maybe what is true to the style. Um, that can mean a lot of different things. It can mean, like I said, certain flavors are amplified, but that's usually what that means. So the head's kind of gone down there as I've been talking. The agitated comes back fairly nicely. Let's give it a smell. So right up front, I get obviously the coffee. I mean, it's brewed with coffee and vanilla, and it's a very coffee-forward beer. It's coffee grounds, though. It's not, which is interesting, by the way, because in the Lost episode, the bottle I had, I got more of that cold brewed coffee, right? Like if you go to Starbucks and you get a cold brew coffee, I got that note to it, so something a little sweeter, a little creamier. This bottle, the coffee note's a little more astringent. It's coffee grounds, which is really interesting how that varies from bottle to bottle like that. But yeah, coffee grounds, some vanilla. I mean, obviously, the vanilla is not sort of the thing that hits you right away. Some cinnamon for sure, and like a dark fruit too. In some coffee roasts, they can have those that dark sort of cranberry or cherry or sort of stone fruit feel to it or sense to it. I get that in the nose for sure as well. But yeah, I definitely get some chocolatiness. I get some fudginess, almost like the way the vanilla is playing in here as well, with sort of the more traditional porter qualities. It almost smells. It has almost like an ice cream sundae-ish kind of smell to it, a little bit. Very faint. You got to kind of work to get there, but I think it's there for sure. Alcohol is not really detectable, which is nice. Yeah, but And as it warms up, as I've been talking, some of those fruit notes are a little more apparent, and they're playing kind of quite nicely with that sort of coffee grounds, that sort of slightly bitter coffee ground note. But going for a sip. Um, Pretty lively mouthfeel. Pretty well carbonated for sure. Um, Not terribly viscous in the mouth either. It's not aqueous. It's not watery in the mouth. Um, but it's also not this big sort of chewy kind of thing either. That can sometimes happen with a big stout, or I'm sorry, a big porter, or even a stout. Um, yeah, right up front, definitely coffee, chocolate, um, vanilla for sure. Still don't get. It's not like a brewed coffee. I still get almost like a coffee ground kind of thing. Like if you ever have a French press, so you make French press coffee, and there's maybe like you know knock back a sip, and you got like a couple of bit of coffee grounds still in there, and it's got that slightly bitter but still kind of richness to it. That's kind of what I'm getting here in the flavor for sure. Um, Ends with a nice bitterness, not off-putting, but enough to sort of counteract the sweetness. They don't really print the IBUs on the bottles, but I'd be curious to know what the IBUs on this are because I do think that there's definitely um, some decent level of bitterness in here for sure to counteract the sweetness. Um, but yeah, really, really tasty. Very lively too. Like I said, that's what I'm surprised by how lively it is on the palate. You know, some porters they can be like wet blankets on the palate where they just sort of coat your entire palate and kind of weigh you down. This does not do that. This is very, very drinkable. Um, yeah, very, very tasty. Mm-hmm. Mm. And that so that ice cream sundae thing or that like brownie sundae kind of thing is there a little bit too in the flavor. Um, Really, really nice beer. Um, and it's still developing. It's got a very nice sort of creaminess to the mouthfeel too. Um, yeah, very very good. What would you pair this with? This is tough. This would be, I mean, the coffee notes, those vanilla notes. I mean, this to me seems like a dessert beer. This could almost be a dessert beer in and of itself. Um, but you know, I could see pairing this with like a chocolate tort might be good. Something like very rich, very chocolatey. A chocolate tort, like maybe like a um, black like black fruits chocolate cake, kind of like a fruits of the forest chocolate cake kind of thing that's got some raspberries in it, or you know some dark cherries inside the cake, or even maybe just a little bit of higher cacao dark chocolate. I think might be interesting as well. But yeah, really really great beer. Um, and like I said, and the bitterness is there, and almost a slight piney note to it, or earthy note to that bitterness, which is really nice. Again, to balance that sweetness, help kind of cuts it. Um, Gonna sort of revamp how I rate the beers here. Would I get this beer again? Yes, for sure. I have, and I would continue to. But you know, out of 1 to 5, I'd go 3.75 or 4 on this beer. I think it's a really, really interesting uh, beer. I'm not sure it's very indicative of the style of your traditional porter because it's brewed with coffee and vanilla. But it's very very good. And if you're looking for a porter again that is not going to just be something heavy and dragging you down, this would be one to check out. And the best part is too, it's very widely available. It's really affordable. And for those of you who like porters and coffee and vanilla, or your dark beers infused with those types of notes, it's something that I think you guys would really dig. So that is the Victory at Sea from Ballast Point. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really, really appreciate it. The messages and the Facebook comments and all that type of jazz. It's been great to hear from you guys. If you have suggestions for beers you want to see on the show, please write in one guy, one beer at gmail.com. or like I said, leave a Facebook comment or a comment on the YouTube page, or send a Facebook message or anything like that. I want this to be interactive. I want you guys to, reach out to me, and I'd like to then obviously respond and reach out to you guys. So again, thank you guys. We will see you next time on One Guy, One Beer. Until then, go get this beer, and I'm gonna keep drinking. Cheers.